Folks, today I want to talk about some of the hits and misses that Jason Licht has had throughout the past couple of years as general manager and why it very well could lead to the current defensive struggles that the Buccaneers have. Let's talk about it. Shout out to Sleeper, by the way, more on them a little bit later on in this video. So I went back through every single offseason since 2023 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I made a list of the things that I feel like Jason Licht has hit on and the things that I feel like Jason Licht has missed on. And I do want to say, whenever it comes to roster construction and stuff like that, I imagine there are a lot of factors. It's not just Jason Licht. It's not just Todd Bowles. There's a lot of other people in the front office and in the coaching staff that help out in terms of these decisions that are made. And Jason Licht and Todd Bowles have to trust their front office staff and their coaching staff, respectively, to help them make these decisions. Okay. But at the end of the day, not only is Todd Bowles the lead man for who, does things on the roster that he is coaching, but also Jason Licht is also the final say in terms of who is added to this roster. Okay. He has control at the end of the day. So let's go ahead and go over it, starting off with the hits. Okay. And there's a lot to like here with Jason Licht. Okay. He has had a lot of positive things. He re-signed Levante David multiple times, brought back Jamel Dean, traded away Shaq Mason, which was a good deal, brought in Baker Mayfield, brought in Chase McLaughlin, Yaya Diaby, and Cody Mock all in 2023, okay? Great stuff, right? You kept a very solid corner. You traded away an offensive guard that was really only here because Tom Brady was here. You got your new franchise quarterback. You got your new franchise kicker. You got a solid contributing edge rusher in Yaya Diaby, and you got an eventual starting right guard in Cody Mock. That is awesome, okay? Then in 2024, a lot of that work was bringing back the faces, right? Evans was brought back, Mayfield was brought back, McLaughlin was brought back, Winfield and Wirfs were brought back as well. I know some people may say like, well, yeah, duh, James, of course those guys would be brought back, but look, ultimately, Jason Licht could have decided to not bring them back or just could have not have been able to get a deal done. So it is notable to say like, hey, all of these things were able to get done. He did also trade away Carlton Davis, which was a good move. He drafted Tyke Smith, who ends up being a starter. He drafts McMillan, who ends up being a starter. Bucky Irving, who ends up being a starter. He even brought in Sterling Shepard, who I feel like is a hit because he's a solid, capable wide receiver who has had to start for the Bucs in the past year. And then even in 2025, look, he signed Ben Bredesen the previous year. I should have put that in there, but then he re-signed him. I don't hate that move. He brought back Chris Godwin in 2025, which I know the jury's still a little bit out on that move, but I still consider that a hit right now, given the value of the contract. He did bring in Hassan Reddick, who has been okay, all things considered. We'll talk about more with that in a little bit. He did bring back Sterling Shepard, and he had another really good draft. He brought in Emeka Ibuka, Jacob Parrish, Elijah Roberts, Tez Johnson. He also brought back Zion McCollum and Luke Gedeke on good deals. So, like, there's been a lot of good things from the Jason Licht tenure the past couple of years, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and even in stuff with, like, the secondary and stuff like that. On the defensive side, I really think that Jason Licht has done a good job, okay? But you guys are noticing there's not a lot of edge rushing stuff there. There's not a lot of inside linebacker defensive stuff in there. Well, let's go to the misses. Firstly, look, re-signing Anthony Nelson, I don't hate it as much in 2023, but in 2025, I really feel like the Bucs should have let him move on instead of bringing him back. I think that it would have just been interesting to get a new, different veteran face in here. I feel like that Anthony Nelson is a very interchangeable type of guy. Right? There's probably like 30 Anthony Nelsons out there that you could bring in and you wouldn't see much of a difference. But you could just by getting a different face in there. Kalijah Kancey I put as a miss just because of the fact that he has been so stinking hurt throughout his time here with the Buccaneers that it really has been a situation where you cannot rely on him as a former first-round pick from 2023. Then, not finding good replacements for losses in 2023. And look, they lost a lot of depth in this defense. Raheem Nunez-Roches, Akeem Hicks, Carl Nicks, Mike Edwards, Keanu Neal, and Sean Murphy-Bunting. In some ways, they did find replacements for these guys, like Edwards, like Neal, and like SMB. But to be completely honest, I still feel like they're trying to find replacements for Nacho, for Akeem Hicks, and for Carl Nassib. They are missing those quality depth players and have been since that 2023 season, in my opinion. Re-signing Greg Gaines is kind of one of those things I'm talking about, very similar to Anthony Nelson, where it's like, is this guy such a needle mover to where you have to bring him back, or could you go out and find, 100 Greg Gaines that could give you different things? I just feel like Nelson and Gaines feel like just guys, right? They're just a guy in this locker room, not necessarily a priority, so to speak, in terms of bringing them back. So I do count those as misses because, when they were brought back, it was like, well, hey, what do you mean? We do have veterans right here. We do have replacement guys. It's Anthony Nelson and Greg Gaines. And just, they have not been giving the same quality of depth, in my opinion, that you were getting with Nassib, that you were getting with Raheem Nunez-Roches, and especially that you were getting with Akeem Hicks in terms of starting quality ability. Look, in 2024, they didn't have a veteran cornerback on their practice squad when injuries occurred until the end of October. You guys remember Tyreek Thunderberg and Josh Hayes were starting a lot of games early in the 2024 season because of all the injuries that had occurred, and they didn't sign Troy Hill to the practice squad until literally October 30th. That is just not good enough, in my opinion. In 2024, they signed Randy Gregory. He didn't show up, and they got rid of him, and they never replaced him with a veteran. They still continued to roll out the guys that they had with Nelson, with Yaya, with Tryon Shoyinka. Those were basically your top three edge rushers in 2024, and you had brought Randy Gregory in for a reason. Todd Bowles said, literally, we wanted a veteran presence, and then he doesn't show up, and you don't replace him. Why? Does not make sense to me at all. Drafted Chris Braswell in 2024 as well, by the way. That's a miss. I mean, I really am out on Braswell at this point. I get that it's year 2, but the dude just looks borderline unplayable. I mean, that is just an absolute fact, in my opinion. Another thing that was a big deal, which again, this is kind of where we dive into, is this more of a Jason Licht thing? Is this more of a Todd Bowles thing? Trusting KJ Britt as a full-time starter and not bringing in more help after Servassier Dennis got hurt until literally week 18 of the 2024 season. Keep in mind, Servassier Dennis only played 4 games that year. So, I've said it so many times. Why was a guy like Deion Jones not on this practice squad getting reps and rotating in with KJ Britt until the very end of the season? That's ridiculous, in my opinion, and that is simply not good enough. Also, trusting Tryon Shoyinka as a full-time starter and not bringing in a veteran, as I said, after Randy Gregory left, until you brought in Shaq Barrett literally right before the season ended. Again, why are these types of players not on the practice squad at the beginning of the year, just in case? Even if you wanted to have Shaq Barrett on the practice squad, or I get that Shaq Barrett situation was tricky because he had that conflict with the Dolphins where he was retired. He wanted to come back. The Dolphins were like, no, we're not activating you. I understand that. But why didn't you have a different veteran pass rusher on this practice squad? Again, it's more reactive stuff instead of proactive stuff, in my opinion. Signing Riley Dixon in 2025, that's a miss. I also could throw in bringing in Thomas McGaughey, but that's more of a Todd Bowles decision in 2024. Signing Anthony Walker in 2025, and then not replacing him after you released him. Look, you brought in Anthony Walker to possibly be your linebacker 3, maybe even your linebacker 2. You release him. Okay, whatever. That's your right. That's your decision, whatever it is. But then you just trust Servassier Dennis to be the full-time starter without bringing in a veteran to replace Anthony Walker. I should have added that to that number 12 point there. But again, it's a very similar thing to like the Randy Gregory thing. It's like you release Anthony Walker. Well, you brought him in for a reason, right? You wanted a veteran presence in that linebacker room along with Deion Jones. And Bowles was giving praise to Anthony Walker and Deion Jones, by the way. But then they release Anthony Walker for whatever reason, and then just say, well, hey, it's the Servassier Dennis show now. But no, that's not, but you didn't think that like 2 weeks ago whenever you brought in Anthony Walker. So what are we talking about here? Again, it's not proactive roster building. Okay, now the Bucs find themselves with a problem at inside linebacker, where the trust in Servassier Dennis has not fully come to fruition the way they thought it was going to, and you don't have a backup plan because Deion Jones is meh, good special teams guy, but meh at inside linebacker. Anthony Walker sure as heck would be helpful right now, or even a guy like Anthony Walker would sure as heck be helpful right now, but you didn't replace him. You didn't replace David Walker after he tore his ACL this year. Again, you drafted David Walker in the 4th round for a reason, right? It's not like you were going to cut him 4th round pick, right? You drafted a guy in the 4th round for a reason. He tears his ACL. What do? You don't do anything. You trust that Hassan Reddick and Yaya Diaby were just going to figure it out in the pass rush and that Braswell would make a leap. Even with the Anthony Walker injury, it's like, Braswell's going to make that leap. We still have Anthony Nelson. Hassan Reddick and Yaya Diaby are going to figure it out and be studs, and it'll be fine, right? You just didn't have enough depth there. And we've seen that in the defensive line room now. As I said, you have Logan Hall there. Kalijah Kancey tears his pec. And you just don't have good depth at inside linebacker, at defensive line, at edge rusher. And you've been missing. And you've been bringing back guys that, quite frankly, you don't really need to bring back. Like, if you ask the Bucs, they would say, what do you mean? We have Greg Gaines, we have Anthony Nelson. That's good depth. No, it's not. It's not. These guys are interchangeable. These guys aren't a Raheem Nunez-Roches or an Akeem Hicks or a Carl Nassib. These guys are not those types of players, right, in terms of the equality of the depth. Servassier Dennis, it's like, oh, well, Servassier Dennis is going to make a leap. Chris Braswell is going to make a leap. Okay, we don't have Kalijah Kancey towards Peck. You didn't replace him, by the way. I should have put that on this list. Kalijah Kancey towards Peck. You didn't bring in a veteran defensive lineman to replace him. You just said, well, we're gonna have a rotation thing. And look, you drafted Elijah Roberts. That's cool. That's awesome. Love to see that. But again, you're just asking too much from like mid to late round picks. I mean, it started with KJ Britt, 5th round inside linebacker. And it's like, okay, yeah, we trust him to be the starter. Missed. Servassier Dennis, 5th round pick inside linebacker. Well, now we trust him to be the starter. Kind of missing. Elijah Roberts, that one's panning out fine. But it's like you shouldn't just sit there whenever these moves happen and just say, well, we trust the draft picks, right? It's like, I understand that to a point. But you should have more quality depth veterans in here. You should. Simple as that, okay? Because we are seeing the very apparent lack of depth here. And you've had chunks of time here where you could bring in names. You're not even names. You could bring in people to help, veterans who have helped and been a part of teams before. And you just have not been doing it, okay? And it's been a problem the past couple of years now, really on the defensive side of the ball. In that 2024 season, it was in the cornerback room. In the 2025 season, it was in the cornerback room and inside linebacker and at edge rusher. In the 2025 season, it's at D-line, it's at edge rusher, it's at inside linebacker. Those are the 3 position groups now. In this roster construction is just so much more, we will react when it is a doomsday scenario versus, hey, why don't we bring in a veteran linebacker on the practice squad at the beginning of the season? Or why don't we just consider bringing back Anthony Walker? When these things begin to not work, and it's more so just, hey, things will play themselves out and things will work eventually, and it's not, and you can't do that. You can't be reactive on doomsday when you could have been proactive and avoided these depth issues from happening in the first place. So just wanted to give my thoughts and opinions on this, everybody. One more thing before we go ahead and head out. Shout out to Sleeper, the proud sponsor of this channel. If you guys do use the code MrBucs, you will get a 100% match up to $100. That is, again, whenever you use the code MrBucs. Also, just for signing up, everybody, you get $20 for free. As you guys can see over here, making picks as simple as hitting a few buttons. So make sure you go check out Sleeper today and enjoy football the way it was meant to be. That is together. Guys, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. As always, I will see you all in the next video or the next live stream. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now, and go Bucs.